It's a new week in Miami, and mercifully, time to turn the page. After Thanksgiving, we do that here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL Draft lead for the 33rd team. Want to thank you for making Locked On Dolphins your first Miami Dolphins listen of the day. Shout out to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. What time is it? It's game time. It's time for us to turn the page on Thanksgiving. I have some final Packers game thoughts. Miami obviously falling by a final score of 30-17, spotting the Packers 14 points in a first quarter that had possibly everything that could go wrong. You had a Murphy's Law quarter other than like disastrous injuries in that stretch of time. But I think the biggest thing that I take away from the Green Bay game, aside of the fan discourse, which I have no interest in, I don't run a Tua Tagovailoa podcast. I don't run a Fire X, Y, and Z podcast. I don't run anything. It's a Miami Dolphins show. And what I would say about the discourse that took place this weekend from Dolphins fans about the performance of the team and the quarterback was not amongst the 5 biggest reasons why you lost the football game on Thursday. Did he play his best game of the season? No, he didn't. Did you see some of the limitations that exist with what his skill set is in that environment? Yes, you did. But Tua didn't misplay the punt that put the Packers inside the red zone after you forced a punt on the first defensive series of the game. Tua didn't miss 20-something tackles. I think Pro Football Focus had him charted 23 missed tackles. I think more than half of Jordan Love's passing yards came after the catch in this game. He certainly wasn't calling plays that had Alec Ingold as the preferred. Just the fourth down play in general had so much discourse around it this weekend. Tua takes a sack on fourth down. But your progression on that play, when you go back and watch it, was Alec Ingold in the flat, Jalen Waddle on a route that you already hit on a 2-point conversion. They had successfully covered with outside leverage, and Durham Smythe. With the group of players that you have on this roster and collected with the entire roster identity being, we want to have playmakers to create space. Your play call, and I got to have it fourth down, had 2 of the top 3 preferred in progression targets on the play as Alec Ingold and Durham Smythe. I don't know what to tell you, right? Like, that, and Mike said after the game he'd like to have it back. I think everybody would like to have it back, but there's been too many of those in too many moments, especially in these kinds of games with these kinds of game scripts. Negative game scripts is the Achilles heel of the Dolphins. For all of the talk and narrative about soft or not soft, or you get on top and they lay down the Jordan Poyer things over the offseason, it's true at this point. Like you can't sit here and debate. Anytime the Dolphins go down by multiple scores, the way the game is called changes. Balance goes out the window. There's a frenetic way in which they choose to play, particularly on like game management, field position type things, play call, balance, despite how much time is or is not left in the game. And usually those games snowball on you to great dramatic effect. And you saw it again on Thursday. And there is a roster construction ideological shift that is going to happen with this football team. I think that's true. And whoever makes it into the 2025 season and off season, out of the current collection of prominent figures that run and manage and assemble this football team, you're going to be transitioning, I think, into a window of adapt or die, right? Doubling and tripling down on this ideology of we want to create and manufacture space and attack space. That works if you play complementary football, flawless football, mistake-free football, and this team does not do that and has not done that in big moments against quality opponents for quite some time. And what that unfortunately means is that's how you end up swimming upstream to the tune of 1-15 in the last 16 games against like playoff teams that this franchise has played, whatever that statistic is. That's how you get there. Because when you try to assemble a roster to play every game to a certain script, and then you play against better teams and you don't hold up your complimentary end of the bargain, and then you deconstruct how you call a plan to win the game and solve the problems, and you put all that pressure back on yourself as the play caller to solve the problems with how you call the plays and how you create space based off the tools that you have. And then in a goal line situation, your answer is Alec Ingold and Durham Smythe. Like, that's a hard pill to swallow. There's a number of hard pills to swallow for this Dolphins team. And we're going to come out of the Green Bay game with following up on something that I had said a little earlier in the season. I think it was after the Buffalo game, the second Buffalo game. But things that I'm continuing to look for in players that are on this roster across these 5 games, what it means, what's at stake, whose seats might be hottest. We're going to get into all of that here as we do our final debrief of Thanksgiving and then start to get ready for the New York Jets, which are coming to town on Sunday for week, was it 14? So that's coming up next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure that you stick with us. Locked On Dolphins fans, I know you're like me and your holiday shopping list is far complete. To be honest, I've barely started, but if that's the case, I've got the perfect gift for passionate sports fans in your life. Perhaps you've heard of Ice Shaker. Ice Shaker is now officially licensed with the NFL, NHL, NBA, NCAA, and MLB, and will make an ideal gift created and used by the Gronkowski brothers. Ice Shakers has sold over 1 million bottles. They have changed the game with workout bottles, and this is the gift you've been looking for. Go to iceshaker.com and use code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% on your order. Kitchen-grade stainless steel bottles won't absorb odor like plastic bottles do, which is great news because every workout bottle I have ever had, I've had to throw out after a couple of weeks just because no matter how you wash it, it stinks. The protein powder, if you put stuff other than water in there, it gets messy. But that problem is solved with Ice Shakers. You can order your team-branded bottles today at iceshaker.com and use code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. Ice Shakers, show your support for your teams with the best branded workout bottles on the market. Ice Shakers. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is sponsored by BetterHelp. How do you stay cozy in the winter months? For some, wrapping up in a blanket with a mug of hot chocolate and watching a movie or a football game is the best way to spend the month of December. Therapy is a great way to bring yourself some comfort that never goes away, even as the seasons change. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You can fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. All right. So we alluded to creating space, the entire ideology of the offensive side of the football with this current collection and what they bet on in the offseason was we want to create space and attack space. And sometimes you have to manufacture space. And this is not, I mean, this goes back to the preseason performance reviews of the offensive line that some people took exception to, was saying, that they played at a sufficient level, and it was all relative to what they were being asked to do. But their performance of what they're being asked to do versus what is the ideal way to construct the unit to provide as big of a menu as possible to beat any given team, those are two different things. And if you remember, you go back to some of the pre-draft stuff, and then we get on the board at 21. My pick at that spot would have been Graham Barton, the offensive lineman out of Duke, because I do believe that the ideology the team has absorbed since Mike McDaniel has come to town of we're going to go full on Shanahan 49ers style. We're going to absorb all the skill players. We're going to rely on our coaching and our skill players to create the space that we need to provide the answers, to work around the trenches. And it's like that script, again, it works if you, like San Francisco has had for quite some time, not this year, had high-level defensive play, and you play disciplined, and you don't beat yourself, and you can play to a certain game script to stay balanced offensively. I don't remember I think San Francisco has one comeback win from double-digit points down in the second half of like football games in the entirety of Kyle Shanahan's tenure with the football team. It's the same stuff. And for Mike McDaniel and the Miami Dolphins, I think you're at the point now with the way this season has unfolded, you have to have the uncomfortable conversation. I know Brett Coleman pointed this out on social media a couple weeks ago. It might have been a couple months ago at this point. I don't know. They all bleed together. But we were talking about what Miami's been able to do successfully. And he pointed out Sean McVay and the Rams. And the Rams used to be the same deal. And then Sean McVay said, I'm tired of this. And he went out, he got a bunch of guys that are 320, 330 pounds to play on the interior of his offensive line so they could create displacement and create space as compared to manufacturing space and attacking it that way. I think that is a roster construction element of this football team that has to change. And whatever needs to be done from a personnel and decision maker standpoint for that to happen, you're kind of reaching the point where you have to adapt or die. And no reinforcements, maybe Isaiah Wynn is coming through that door to save you in the here and now. I don't think Isaiah Wynn's the savior of the offensive line. I think the only player really at this stage of their career who can physically create displacement in the degree that which we're talking about with any level of provenness to it at the NFL level is Austin Jackson, who's out for the year. Now, I think Patrick Paul is capable of doing it. I think Aaron Brewer is in a unique situation because most centers don't have to create one-on-one displacement against nose tackles anyway. Most of the time, they are a in-space work up to the second-level player. Teron Armstead's moved well this year. I think he's created movement better than he has in his first two seasons with the Dolphins, but the long-term viability of Teron is obviously in question. Defensively, though, let me finish with this on offense. I see all the comments that come in on the show. I see all the comments on social media. And I alluded to it at the top of the show. Like, I don't run a Tua Tagovailoa fan club podcast, but then I have supporters of Tua who take exception to some of the frank conversations we have about what Tua is and is not. Tua is not the problem. And for some of y'all who pop in constantly, every problem that exists with the team draws back to the quarterback. I don't know that you guys are ever going to be happy. Because I watch Kansas City Chiefs fans complain about Patrick Mahomes from time to time. I sit here and watch Buffalo Bills fans complain about their football team because they haven't won the big game. I sit here and watch Baltimore Ravens fans because I cover the league. So I see how fan bases across the league react to this kind of stuff. Lamar Jackson's won 2 MVPs. He gets a ton of hate. Even if your sole source of fulfillment as a fan would be a Super Bowl. I promise you, the goalposts would move because I see it for fan bases everywhere. And I try on this show, like, and you can have a different opinion, but the conversation and curiosity of other people's opinions is what I really covet about this space as a whole, as compared to the yelling and screaming and the feet stomping and the no matter what information is presented, I just don't like this player. So I don't want them to be successful. I have bad news for you if you're one of those never Tua people. The Dolphins are not drafting a quarterback to replace Tua Tagovailoa this offseason. It's not going to happen. They're not going to be in position to do it. As this season has unfolded and as Tua has returned to play and how he has played and the value that he has illustrated, he's going to continue to be the team starting quarterback. And I don't think he's the problem with the team. Do I think he's a skill-specific player? Yeah. Do I think he's a quarterback you can win with? Yes. So every time the Dolphins lose a game, and now the goalposts have moved about fraudulent yards, who cares? Who cares about how many yards? They were in 5 plays in the first quarter. Who cares what the yards were at garbage time and this, that? There's a bunch of shows you can find to do all that kind of stuff. There's a bunch of Dolphins accounts on social media that you can follow for all the doomsday. Vic Fangio's team did this, and how about the Dolphins just worry about the Patriots lost this game, so now the playoff. Who cares? You got games to play. You got games to win. You got jobs to keep or not keep. So I know I'm a little all over the map here, but you sit here all weekend and digesting just how everybody is just responding to everything. It's exhausting. It's like, can we have well-grounded, honest conversations about what is and isn't happening with the team? And if you want to do that, that's fine. But this show's probably not going to be for you. And I'm not talking about this episode. I'm talking this entire show. Because I don't play that game. I don't play the politics of, oh, well, I have to stand up for Tua because Tua gets a lot of hate. Every quarterback gets a lot of hate. In the same sense, every bit of criticism that I have for Tua being then turned around and people who can't even get the facts right about what I talk about on the show and use it as ammunition to justify moving on from Tua. It's exhausting. Defensively, which is where I intended to go 5 minutes ago before all of the frustration of this weekend came back. Defensively, more of the same issue. Physical temperature checkers and tone setters. You've got a few of them. You need more. You need, and it was after the Buffalo game, we said we were looking for bullies. We were looking for dynamic athletes. We were looking for smart football play and selfless football play. Those kinds of elements, I thought defensively, you played very uninspired. And you've got some guys who are a little long in the tooth, who are in key spots. Calais Campbell. I think Jalen Ramsey is nowhere near a problem with this football team. I generally like the play that Jordan Brooks has given you this year. Zach Sealer is a franchise cornerstone player. Chop Robinson got a lot of attention from the Packers. You need more answers there. You have a lot of youth at corner. I think this secondary is probably, if we're being honest, outside of Jalen Ramsey, I'd probably try as best as I could to overhaul the whole group as much as I possibly can this offseason. And I love a definitive running mate for Jordan Brooks. I think the back seven is where most of the work is done. But also your edge rush room, you're going to have some uncomfortable conversations about Bradley Chubb not playing football this year. I don't think anybody expected to get to December and not see Bradley Chubb. It's a big part of the reason why a lot of these teams that you're playing that have quarterbacks that can get off their spot and throw the ball, Kyler in Arizona killed us with that. Josh Allen killed us with that. Jordan Love killed us with that. You can get free runners, but you can't finish plays because you don't have complementary rush because you're getting one guy that's through. And if you're rushing with 4, it's chop. And if it's not chop, it's nobody. Like your pass rush reps for everybody else on the roster are offering zero value for you. Talk a little bit more about that and what is at stake for this Dolphins team next here on Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. You can tackle the NFL action with FanDuel's #1 sportsbook experience for America right now. You can be a new customer over at FanDuel and bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page as where you place your bets at FanDuel.com. You can visit to join today. Right now, the Dolphins are favored at home this weekend against the Jets by 6.5 points. That line has stayed fairly steady throughout the course of the past week. It was a futures bet that was up last week as well before the Thanksgiving game. So if you like the Dolphins to win by a touchdown against the Jets, get it now, because I would expect you'll see some more movement on that potentially as the week unfolds. Jets team very much in flux. They get some injuries in the secondary. Your chance to get in under a -7 line is probably right now. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. If you want to get down to the game on Sunday, or if you want to see any of the local teams play, whether that's the Heat, or the Panthers, the Dolphins, or the Canes, maybe they're going to go bowling for sure. Are they going to make the playoff? I guess we'll find out after the disappointing loss that they had to Syracuse over the weekend. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets for all of the local concerts, comedy, theater, and more. With just a few taps, you can get tickets delivered directly to your phone. There's all-in pricing that you can toggle, so there's no surprise fees when you put the tickets into your cart. And they also have the Game Time ticket guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find lower tickets in the same row and section for less somewhere else. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. So where do you go from here, right? You have 5 games left to play. I don't care about playoff probabilities. I know every time a game has a touchdown that's scored, there's going to be updates from some about the New York Times playoff probability odds updated after the Jets scored a touchdown or gave up a 2-point conversion. I don't care. You have 5 games left to play. You should, theoretically, I would assume you're going to be favored in 4 out of 5. And I know those of you who want to change might not want the team to win games. Those things can be completely separate for me. I watched the team win 7 out of 8 with Brian Flores, finish with a winning record, get to the end of that season, and still make a conscious decision to part ways with the coach and make a significant change because it was the right thing to do when you evaluated the situation with the football team. I don't see any reason why you couldn't theoretically do the same thing here and now. And I know you could say, oh, well, then it's ammunition for an argument to keep so-and-so. I'm a fan of the team. I'm going to want them to win the games. You should want them to win the games as well, I think, because I don't think it is that is not a mutually exclusive thing, which is the number one issue with any opinion that you state, is it becomes mutually exclusive from any other possible variable that is remotely tied to whatever opinion that you had. Like saying Xavier Restrepo would be a great add to the Dolphins wide receiver. And everybody says, well, they need a big wide receiver. Yeah, they have 4 wide receivers under contract next season. One of them is Taj Washington, who's never played it down as the 7th round pick. I think they're going to need more than one wide receiver. So maybe they can get a big wide receiver and they could add Xavier Restrepo. Well, why are you talking about adding wide receivers when they need offensive line and defensive line help? You're right, but they're probably going to add about 30 players to the roster this season. You're not just going to run 4 wide receivers out there and field the team. I digress. ridiculous. So, what's at stake the rest of the way? I don't think you have to lose games to facilitate change. I don't think anything will change relative to the facts of the facts. This Dolphins season has been sunk by a number of variables. Untimely injuries. Who does that fall back onto? That unfortunately falls back onto the person who constructed the team. You've got cornerstone players like Jalen, Phillips, and Bradley Chubb who have given you to this point in the season a combined 3.5 games of play. One is a first-round pick. Another is a veteran player that you traded a first-round pick +4 and gave a big contract to. The quarterback missed 4 games. His replacements were non-functional NFL quarterbacks. Some of that blame goes on the coach. The person who ultimately has their name on every person on the roster is the general manager of the team. And I've generally liked the job that Chris Grier has done. But I don't think there's any way that you look at the regression in sacks. Like going from Vic Fangio to Anthony Weaver, it's a big change. But it shouldn't be this dramatic drop in sacks that has the Dolphins amongst the worst teams in the league at sacking the quarterback. You're amongst the worst teams in the league at sacking the quarterback because Jalen Phillips has played 3.5 games. Bradley Chubb hasn't played at all. Those two are your starters. Your replacement for of Emmanuel Agba, unless you're going to run twist games and manufacture him free runs in the B gap, I don't think he's won a single rep around the outside of the edge all season long to sack the quarterback. That room has been ravaged in a way that has neutered your entire ability to authentically rush the passer unless it's coming from the interior. Well, now you're at the point where you've probably had to stretch Calais Campbell a little thinner with snaps because of the Zach Sealer injuries that throughout the month of end of October, beginning in November. I don't think Calais has played the best football of his season in the last couple of weeks. And your group behind that of Benito Jones, Deshaun Hand, I mean, those guys are viable space takers in the middle. Neither one of them is really a profound pass rush threat. I think the name who's most at stake is general manager Chris Grier. And I know many of you are over Chris. I would say, let's bear in mind the furthest I think you can tie responsibility for this Dolphins team to Chris is 2016 when he became assigned the general manager. I personally assign it to him as of 2019 when he assumed full football operations control. I know some of you guys want to go back 20 years, 2 decades of losing experience. Like, he was director of college scouting and the assistant director of college scouting for like 12 years in that stretch. I don't care what the team was when he was in those roles. And the reason I know that is because I cover the league. I'm the NFL draft league for the 33rd team. I've been covering the league from a draft perspective for a decade, going to all these events. I know directors of college scouting in the league, and I talk to them about what they think about players, and then I watch what their teams do on draft weekend, and they're 2 very different things. But whether it's 2016 or 2019, this process has played out, and the things that have sunk this season, I think, all tie back to Chris. That would be where my frame of mind is at, and the name who has the most at stake for an argument to make a change or not, I'd probably personally make a change either way. We'll get into that a little bit later in this week and in the weeks ahead. Would be Chris Grier at general manager. That's going to do it for us here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I am out of here. Talk to you all again soon.